First, we have to get to Alex Jones. Now, we have to do the disclaimers. The beginning is Alex Jones is a nut. Mm-hmm. Alex Jones says things that aren't true. Alex Jones, conspiracy theorist, blah, blah, blah. So, because if you defend somebody's right to free speech, then people automatically strawman you and say, well, you just must believe in everything that they believe in, which is why censors usually start with somebody like Alex Jones or, as you made the point a couple weeks ago, sex workers or hackers or undesirables.
Correct. The undesirables, the people who are don't show up to be to the PTA meetings with their gigantic flags and minivans.
Right. Yes, the less respectable members of society.
Quote unquote, like people like culturally aren't like respectable.
Right. So, you know, we did an episode on this a couple weeks ago, and Jones, when 15 different companies, and I actually spoke to Twitter today, and I said in their sales department, I was like, hey, just so you know, I took this phone call because you didn't do what the other 15 companies did, and you respect free speech. And so I answered your phone call.
Nice.
Because if Facebook had been calling, I probably wouldn't have. So it would have been just another sales call. But I think it is important as consumers to let companies know when they do the right or the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that these companies don't have a right to do what they want with on their property. Mm-hmm. So that's the other caveat is, yes, we agree with property rights. No, we don't agree with things that Alex Jones says.
Correct.
Okay? But we have to look at the precedent being set. And as we outlined in that last show, there's some precedents being set that are really troubling, and it just is compounding. In 2 weeks, it's already starting to spread into domains and credit card processors, as we'll see. And so political speech is now being eroded at the corporate level because of leftist bully groups. And you went off before the show about this.
Yeah, I have been like fit to tide on this on this because like I talked about this on several different podcasts back in like the Obama era stuff, when Operation Choke Point, when they were going after gun groups and sex workers to squeezing them out of financial institutions, making sure they don't have access to different things. And you know, and a lot of people didn't say anything like that except some of the hardcore libertarians at the time did.
Yeah,
a lot of them saw the case, saw what was going on, and then decided to try to create systems to get around all that.
Right.
That was the beauty, the hope that we had in Bitcoin. Not some, not some idea like, hey, we're all going to get rich. We're all going to or we're going to do some thing with the blockchain and make IDs, do smart contracts, and all this other bull crap. No, the idea was to get away from and the power from the banking system, because of Operation Choke Point showed us that, hey, if they can stop your ability to, access to banking,
right,
your ability to accept or, take away money, they essentially can kill your message.
Sure.
You can't take anything. That's why it was so powerful to try to get people onto cryptocurrency, because they couldn't stop that.
Yes.
You couldn't stop that. That's why like antiwar.com and other different places were like taking these cryptocurrency. That's why like some of the running joke when Bitcoin was skyrocketing was, how many sex workers that have like 1 or 2 Bitcoin back in the day that never did anything with it.
Right.
When they when Operation Choke Point was going on, I was like, how many they're super rich right now because they took in Bitcoins.
And you can donate it in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash at wearelibertarians.com/support. We take Bitcoin and crypto now, and I've received no crypto, but that's okay. We'll get there.
I'll give you some Doge.
All right. I don't take Doge. So the only place that I could find this next clip is MediaMatters.org. And for those of you who don't know what Media Matters is, it's basically a leftist group that goes out and frames conservative, libertarian, and anti-left voices, and then just pumps its content into the minds of the mainstream media. And so the only place that I could find the video of August 13th Alex Jones Periscope was on Media Matters website. And so I originally heard this on a No Agenda show, and it doesn't sound edited to me, so I don't know if it is or not, but it's definitely not the full clip. And so this is the only place that this exists, and it's wrapped around basically how you should view this. And so the entire pretense of Alex Jones being kicked off of Twitter for a few days, put in a timeout, as Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, said, was to make him think about his actions. But the reason that he was kicked off was that he was threatening the media by telling his supporters to grab their battle rifles. And so here is the Media Matters article. On Periscope, Alex Jones tells supporters to get their battle rifles ready against Antifa, the mainstream media, and Chi-Com operatives. And Jones, it's time to act before the media carries out, quote-unquote, a false flag. And so then they give... They basically then put this up there, and it's just, frankly, pretty much misleading exactly what Jones says. So here's the clip of what Jones says, and again, this is for Media Matters, but it didn't sound edited from the original.
Military. So I already understand who the Chi-Com operatives and the traitors are, to understand who's trying to take the First Amendment, who's trying to bankrupt the country, who's trying to shut down everything, who admitted they wanted to bankrupt healthcare in America to bring us to our knees. We're under attack, and you know that. You've pointed out mainstream media is the enemy. But now it's time to act on the enemy before they do a false flag. I know the Justice Department's crippled a bunch of followers and cowards, but there's groups, there's grand juries, you call for it. It's time politically and economically and judiciously and legally and criminally to move against these people. It's got to be done now. Get together the people you know aren't traitors and aren't cowards and aren't hedging their frickin' bets like all these other assholes do. And let's go. Let's do it. Because they're coming. Now, in your wisdom, you may be playing possum and waiting for them to come in. But America needs to know that they've got their little pathetic commie red teams ready. And they've got their targets picked out. The sheriffs, the judges, the police chiefs, the patriots, the veterans, the talk show host, everybody. And everybody's going to be amazed when they come, when those cowards come. And it's going to hit in the middle of the night, and they're coming. And they're coming. And they're coming. They think they can really take down America. And this is it.
He's leaned back in his chair, contemplating.
So people need to have their battle rifles and everything ready at their bedsides. And you got to be ready, because the media is so disciplined in their deception. Antifa attacked all these people at the White House, beat up reporters, beat up women, children, no coverage. And they've got discipline, folks. They've got criminal discipline because they're a bunch of followers. Here's Vimeo banning us.
All right, so the battle rifles thing was, in my mind, a self-defense. The way that he phrased that, it seemed like self-defense.
Right.
When you hear that, have you heard that before?
Well, like keep your battle rifle by your bed.
No, I'm saying the whole clip. Have you heard that Alex Jones clip?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay.
No, only thing I heard was like Alex Jones trying to describe it, and he's talked about how it was cut up and stuff like that.
Right.
I heard that.
Okay. And so this was the clip that got him banned, because then people who follow Media Matters started barraging Twitter, basically saying he's using Periscope, which is owned by Twitter, to incite violence. In your opinion, did you think he was inciting violence in that clip?
If he's inciting violence in that clip, then you can probably go after every preacher on Sunday.
Right. In what way?
Talk about you've got to have your armor on for Jesus and get your sword of righteous anger out there.
Right.
It's the exact same type of like rhetoric or words someone would use. But even in this one, it's like, you have to be ready and have this sitting there by your side. Well, yeah. Okay. He's not citing for violence. He's not calling for people like, hey, we're going to do violence. We're going to meet up at this location X, and we're going to make sure you bring your rifles and bring plenty of ammo. He's not saying that. He's not even remotely saying to that. He's mostly saying, like, you got to have your group, and you've got to be ready. That's about it, because especially within also context of how the show is. If you listen to his show, which is also some of the, there's nothing wrong with entertaining conspiracy theories. I think there's something wrong with some of the dystopian doom and gloom through it.
Right.
That Alex Jones show sometimes gives off, not all the time, but sometimes, and in context of how that show plays out, this seems par for the course.
Right.
Of the entertainment of the Alex Jones show.
So when you break it down, and as we told you in that Alex Jones, we gave the entire template. So if you didn't listen to it, go back and listen to that. But we gave you the whole template where it starts with taking a selectively edited piece of content. There's already a pretense built. There's already a vibe, a meme basically, that you're a dangerous person because pundits and people go on all these shows and Huffington Post and Mediaite tweet out all day, crazy things that you've said, and they put all these various things out that give the general impression that you're a dangerous person, that you are inciting violence, and so people who have never listened to Alex Jones, who don't understand who he is or what he does, just take the media's word for it. And so when they finally then get a selectively edited clip like that, or he says something that is... I don't think he's towing the line. I think you're right. I think he's speaking in metaphors as so often he does. I did not hear in that clip that he was activating a secret army of insurgents. Like they talk about the Alex Jones followers and that crowd, like and the alt-right and all these people, like there's some sort of like black flag organization that the secret code is given out, and all of a sudden these American terrorist Timothy McVeigh types are activated, and there's going to be terrorist actions. I didn't see any of that during the Charlottesville rally, the part 2 this past week. I saw on Ford Fisher, who's a libertarian, basically videographer and documentarian. I saw him at that part 2 rally, and I saw 25 unarmed white supremacists in this little pig pen. And then hundreds of Antifa beating the windows in of a Marine Corps office, heavily armed. It happened with the Gavin McInnes rally and the Proud Boys and all that in I think California this past week as well. So I don't, with my own eyes, see the narrative that is being given out about the followers of Alex Jones as some sort of dark army that is about to commit domestic terrorism.
Right.
I mean, if anything, it was, if you go back to the Tea Party era when this all started, I mean, the 2008 report out of Minnesota and this like terrorism unit basically saying, watch out for domestic terrorists. They're libertarians or Ron Paul supporters or blah, blah, blah. Like, how many domestic terrorist acts have we had that have been motivated by right-wing nut jobs? I can't recall any in the last decade.
Yeah, I can't recall.
I can tell you about the baseball field shot up by the guy who was a Rachel Maddow fan.
That's true.
I can tell you about Steven what's-his-face in Vegas, and nobody knows what his motivation was.
Yep.
And I can tell you about a bunch of Islamic jihadist attacks, but I can't tell you a single right-wing homegrown terrorist. So I just don't get this whole narrative, because the reality of what I see is not the same as what I see reported in mainstream news.
And the only one they really try to go back for is Timothy McVeigh.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, well, what was Timothy McVeigh's motivation? What made him do what he wanted to do?
Right.
I'm not saying I support what he did, but why did he do the thing that they claimed that he did?
Well, Janet Reno murdered a bunch of women and children and innocent people at a compound in Waco, Texas.
Yeah.
That's why he did what he did. The federal government killed people at Ruby Ridge.
Correct.
And the federal government was overly heavy-handed in these incidents. But that was 30 years ago at this point? 20 years?
No, not 30. That was, about 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago.
Yeah, so we're talking decades.
Yeah,
since the militia movement.
Correct.
And so to paint the, and there's definitely nothing about the alt-right that I'm a fan of. Like
they're not right wing anyway.
Richard Spencer, for instance, I think is he's a collectivist. He is a racist. He is incredibly distasteful,
which is not right wing.
Right,
it can be over there.
But I also don't see the guy inciting violent riots.
No,
I see him getting punched by leftists. So the whole narrative just totally falls apart. And what it really comes down to is they're trying to create this idea that these are dangerous people, that these people who believe in these certain things are dangerous people, when in fact, meet a white supremacist, meet a Klansman, meet a Nazi. They're pathetic human beings. Like, the idea of a Nazi and a white supremacist and a Klansman was always very scary to me until I met one about 2 years ago. And I was like, wow, what a pathetic human being. So, what they do is they create an environment where whenever they can get you out of context saying something like this, they can then do what Lester Holt and Brian Stelter on CNN did to Jack Dorsey. They sit down with a CEO, and I guarantee maybe Jack Dorsey saw the Alex Jones clip. And being a left-leaning person probably saw it as a dangerous thing because he probably doesn't listen to Alex Jones either. And he even admits in one of these interviews, like, we're a left-leaning biased company and we have to watch that. We have to police that. So, his instinct is, I'm not going to fight. I mean, it's borderline and people are outraged by it and the mob is at my door. And so it's like, how do I explain the nuance of, like, this guy is just, he's like a preacher. He's using metaphor. I just got to do something, and I know that banning him outright would be wrong, so I'll give him a timeout. I'll give him a short ban. Okay, and so he does that. But then, he sits down with Lester Holt, and this is what it really comes down to. Companies hate bad PR. Right. They don't want bad PR, plain and simple. And so, because it cuts into their ability to return money back to their shareholders. And CEOs are held responsible when not enough money is given back to their shareholders.
Correct.
So a free speech platform like Twitter or Facebook does not ultimately care about free speech. They care about returning money to their shareholders. And so when they sit down on the NBC Nightly News, and this is the first question, of course they're going to act. And what's insidious is that Lester Holt and Brian Stelter and the media know this, which is why they want to drown out their competition by asking CEOs this very question.
Posted this week what essentially is a video calling for people to get their battle rifles ready against the media, saying it's time to act, it's got to be done now, move criminally against people.
I didn't hear him say criminally in that clip once.
Right.
And what he just did was take a word salad, mixed the worst parts of it together, and then made it sound like Alex Jones was saying something that he actually wasn't saying. So let's start again. Let's hear that again.
Alex Jones on Twitter posted this week what essentially is a video calling for people to get their battle rifles ready against the media, saying it's time to act, it's got to be done now, move criminally against people. Send a chill up my spine. How about yours?
What kind of question is that?
Very leading question.
Right. Alex Jones said the N-word and that he'd like to kill all black people. Are you for or against?
Can you play said clip before I answer?
That was just as truthful as what we just heard.
Well, yeah, that's what the thing is. Like, all right, I didn't hear said clip, didn't know about said clip, and people post millions of things a day. Can't police them all, bro.
Right. I am now producing 87 hours a week of broad. Like, do you think that there isn't something that I'm going to say that isn't accurate? It may not be false because my intent is not there, but I'm definitely going to say things. If I'm doing a daily show plus this show and going on other shows, I'm definitely going to say things that are inaccurate from time to time or inartful.
That's why we got the massive producer core, a.k.a. the listeners, that we're more than happy to help keep us on the right track and show us where we're wrong, which we appreciate, even though, we kind of joke sometimes. But we like it because it keeps us on our toes, and, and we do not want to spread out inaccurate information, and you understand how busy we can be, so we appreciate that. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. The idea that these CEOs who are probably far removed from anything that's going on into the day-to-day with that,
right?
Other than, like moving things and getting budgets approved and moving things around. That is a department. Some department is holding that, because if that CEO has anything to do really factual with going on there, then he's a micromanager.
Right.
And they're, they can't work anyways. None of those programmers can work. None of the engineers can do anything. The mods that they have can't do anything because the CEO comes over and micromanages them.
Right.
hey, get these up for ban. Are they okay for ban?
Right. And you're very right. It could have been somebody censoring Alex Jones because they had a political motive, and then he's got to go on national television and defend it and make up a phony baloney response. So he's just been asked, it sends up a chill up my spine whenever Alex Jones threatens to kill people. What about you?
It did. I mean, there's a number of actions that we believe help a call to incitement to violence, and those are the things that we need to make sure that we are protecting a broader collective, and we're taking action on.
You've taken action against him in this instance. What is it? Can you tell us what it is?
I believe we put him in a timeout, removing his ability to tweet for a time period.
Just a short time period?
For a short time period. This is consistent with how we enforce these particular rules.
At what point, though, do you have to recognize a pattern? Not just a single tweet or a single video, but a pattern.
Shout out to Jack Dorsey, because what he just said there is, we just enforced our rules consistently. Mm-hmm. And that's been the part where Twitter gets major props for me through all of this, because they could have piled on with everybody else, and nobody would have faulted them. I mean, they had cover to do it. And what Jack Dorsey said is, no, we have a terms of service, we have rules, and I'm going to follow those rules, even if it makes me, even if I am then the victim of massive amounts of harassment, even from nightly news anchors.
Right.
So shout out to Jack Dorsey for actually following his rules.
Of hate-filled and threatening. At what point, though, do you have to recognize a pattern? Not just a single tweet or a single video, but a pattern of hate-filled and threatening speech?
Well, we have to look more broadly across all actions.
Can you give us some examples, Lester? Just the generic, at what point, blah, 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 because I have declared Alex Jones to be a hate-filled warmonger who actively led us into the war in Iraq. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the New York Times. My bad.
Yeah, sorry.
That was the Washington Post of my network. So let's hear what Jack says to that incredibly ridiculous question.
And also make sure that we're looking at our current policies and evolving our policies under the changing circumstances that we see around us as well.
Your peers, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, took stronger action against Alex Jones. You stood on the sideline. You said he hadn't violated your policies.
Well, the most important thing for us.
So why didn't you follow the crowd and do what everybody else did because it was popular and violate what you have written down on paper?
Yeah. What he should have responded was like, Spotify and Facebook are not my peers. They're lesser platforms.
That's right. We are master race. Oh, I mean, whoa.
They have lesser platforms. That's why Donald J. Trump is on Twitter, not Facebook.
I saw an article that some people value Donald Trump's value to Twitter is $2 billion.
It's the only thing that's keeping Twitter profitable.
That Donald Trump's presence on Twitter is $2 billion of their market cap, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
Is that we are consistent in applying our enforcement. That is critical.
Kudos to him for being consistent and not being just a follower.
We can't build a service that is subjective just to the whims of what we personally believe. We need to.
Is that what your peers did? Bow to whims?
I can't state what their internal decision-making process was. We were focused on ours.
Pussies!
We need to make sure that we are applying our rules consistently. Our rules are, people come to our service, they agree to a terms of service, and that is what we need to look at. That doesn't mean that we can't evolve those rules. That doesn't mean that we can't change those rules, but we need to inform people of those changes and why they matter and how they'll affect behaviors on the platform going forward.
See, that's a very libertarian way of thinking, is that if I make rules, I'm going to follow them to the letter. It's the rule of law instead of the rule of man, which is just the whims of the mob. Yeah. And so it's actually some libertarian thinking kind of in his. And there's something about Dorsey that makes me think he's seen them come. He knows where this is never going to end. Yeah. And if you don't have, he knows he has the cojones and the clout really to like stand up to these people and withstand whatever they throw at him. And so I think hopefully I'm thinking that maybe he may be the guy in the Silicon Valley space that actually stands up to these crowds and just says, enough of this. You're not going to push us around.
Yeah. Correct. He could be one of those leftists that feel like like, wow, the left went way past me. You know,
Right.
I'm not with them, but I'm not with you guys
That's
either.
right.
Like, he finding himself in becoming a centrist, even though his left leanings have never moved.
Sure. He could be a leftist that actually believes in free speech.
Yeah, but who knows? The other thing is with it is, like, we're not also absolving Twitter of any of the bad things it has done.
Sure.
But you're correct that with having Donald Trump's account on there and actually and having majority good, like, what was probably 80 to 90% also of sex workers also on Twitter, and
Right.
use that to market with their fans. So, you know, those are billion-dollar industries that no one really caters to. Leaves that money on the floor. That's why Pornhub has like money to spend, because they cater to an industry that no one else wants to.
Right.
Pornhub's profitable, YouTube isn't. Meh.
Yeah.
And so they've got these people onto Twitter so they're able to market and move things off it. Granted, they do shadow ban some sex workers sometimes, but that's more of the algorithm learning and moving things around.
Sure.
But doesn't it concern you to hear things like a call to arms on your platform? Just put aside the rules for a minute. Is there not a moral obligation? Is there a gut check that with you or your organization in these situations?
So this is a common journalistic technique. I'm going to reframe and restate the question in a different way, slight variant, but in a little bit more of a stronger way that you can't say no to what I want you to say. Because what happens in most, when you really show up at an event and you're talking to journalists, they've got their story written when they walk in. The narrative for the day is and so what I always try to do differently is when I go to something like the Donald Trump rally, I have no story written. I show up because I want to know what's going on. I want to notice what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so the premise that I always start with as an opinion journalist is, I don't know what's going on. Let me figure it out. Let me find out what people are saying from all different sides. I have definite biases. I have definite leanings, but I try to check those and try to get to the truth. And so if I go to something like a Donald Trump rally, which we did a couple years ago, and I walk in, I go, it's going to be nothing but rednecks and bumpkins. And then you walk in, and it's nothing but clean-cut, upper-middle-class white people. And you're like, oh, what does this mean? How did this happen? Where are we going? And so
the Chick-fil-A is going to be lit after this.
Right. And so but you walk in, and the journalists that were there all had their stories written. The crowd is violent. The crowd is this. Donald Trump's going to beat someone up. It couldn't have been further from the truth. Like at a Donald Trump rally that we went to, mm-hmm. and that we covered, it was people they would walk by and they'd heckle. Mm-hmm. In the way that somebody heckles a comedian during a performance, they heckled the media that way. Mm. They didn't shout vitriol. So when Jim Acosta of CNN says he's being, violently taunted, I don't buy it. I don't believe it, because I've seen it with my own eyes. And so the same event that I went to, people were like, Donald Trump did this, and he was awful to the media, and the crowd turned around, and I saw the smiles in the faces of people as they turned around and shouted at Rob Kendall wearing a Make America Great Again hat. So oftentimes they're so bound to whatever narrative that they have pre-written mm-hmm. that they don't want to change the script.
That's like when you also talked about the story of the person who did get kicked out of that rally. Yeah. And like, yeah, get him out of here. They're like, no, come on, this is Indiana. I'm going to, please leave.
The person that got kicked out of the rally was there to make trouble. Mm-hmm. And they were a leftist. They were Black Lives Matter. And the articles that were written was that Donald Trump kicks Black Lives Matter out of his rally. But what they didn't include in those articles was that this person was actively disrupting a private event. Right. So, mm-hmm. But anyways, yep. All right. So back, let's hear this beaut of a question one more time. It's not a matter of following your own rules. At some point, morality has to play into it because he's inciting violence, which he wasn't.
The platform going forward.
But doesn't it concern you to hear things like a call to arms on your platform? Just put aside the rules for a minute. Is there not a moral obligation? Is there a gut check that with you or your organization in these situations?
Well, it is concerning. I mean, we have to put the safety of individuals first in every single thing that we do. And we need to enforce our rules and also evolve our rules around that. So the actions by accounts like Jones can be dangerous, and they can be things that have real-world effects on off the platform. And we need to make sure that we're taking that into consideration and evolving our rules going forward.
So tell me how you're doing that. Specifically, how are you changing?
So we'll end with Lester there, but you hear him buy into he buys into it wholesale, and he then talks about security. And security has always been one of the most fundamental ways that people erode freedoms.
Right.
Because you're not going to argue that you're not going to argue for dangerous pretense. It's like the Edward Snowden case. It's like PRISM got built because people weren't going to stand, like people didn't care enough about privacy. They were scared.
Right.
And so when people are scared, then they'll do whatever you want.
Correct. Yeah. PRISM gets built. You let, Union soldiers come into your town and you're scared. You give them booze. Next thing you know, they burn the thing down because they're drunk.
So let's move on to go. Are you?
Sorry, that was
so
Civil War joke.
So, baby Brian Stelter, Stelter. Damn, son. Brian Stelter, who I originally really liked, but now I have seen the bias that he carries, and as a media critic, so he hosts this show called Reliable Sources on CNN, and so it's on the Sunday panels, and it's basically a media criticism show. And Howard Kurtz used to host it, and then he said or wrote something that was offensive, and then he got moved. He's now at Fox, and so I forget what Howard said, but anyways, so Brian Stelter came in, and he's got a very fleshy head. He's full of just weird lips and big bald head and weird voice, and the TV he's on all the time now, though, on CNN, and he's got the charisma of one of my farts. I take that back. My farts are very charismatic, but so. And he's just is like, he can't believe that we all don't just wholesale buy that Donald Trump is bought and paid for by the Russians, and he's breathless at all the, like, he's just the dean of the journalistic superiority complex. Like, he's the keeper of it. He and Jim Acosta get together on Sundays and talk about how important they are and how they're saving humanity in their little club. Sleepy Chuck Todd comes over, and then they start talking about, how they single-handedly are making America great again, and how dare those idiot people out in the middle of the country question us in any way, shape, or form.
I'm just sorry I got this idea of them going out to brunch after doing hot yoga, and discussing, themselves with mimosas.
So Brian Stelter has on Jack Dorsey, and here's how that goes.
Alex Jones and InfoWars around the initial announcement that no, he has not been abusing, no, he has not been over the line, but then a few days later giving him a timeout.
Well, our system works by people reporting content. So we're not in a place to proactively review everything.
I'm sorry. So he shouldn't have said that. Because now that he's said how their system works, what's going to happen, Harry?
Well, what usually happens in situations like that, people are going to see it, understand and go around it.
Well, no, they're going to start reporting everything they mildly don't like.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, go around it. They see the wall they have to go around. Basically, what I was trying to get away with is saying that they understand the thing that this is the obstacle that they want to get around, and they're just going to go around it to get rid of it.
Yeah,
they want it gone.
We act when we receive reports. That is just consistently enforcing our approach and our rules. People may disagree with that approach. People may say you should be a lot more proactive around all the content. And while we could do that, it requires so many resources. I mean, hours and hours and hours of looking through video content. So at the time, we did not receive reports that we felt we could take any action on that violated on our terms of service. Your colleagues at CNN pointed out a number of them. We took action on one, and then we noticed that all the others, likely because they were made known to Alex Jones and InfoWars, were being deleted. As we receive reports, we take action, and there are varying degrees of enforcement action, starting with warnings to temporary suspensions, which the accounts are now in, all the way to a permanent suspension.
Is it possible that he'll change his behavior on Twitter? You think he really might do that?
I don't know. I mean, just stepping back, like we have evidence that shows like temporary suspensions, temporary lockouts will change behavior. It will change people's approach. I'm not naive enough to believe that it's going to change it for everyone, but it's worth a shot. You know, it's like but more importantly, it's consistent with our enforcement. Like, we can't just keep changing randomly based on our viewpoints, because that just adds to the fear of companies like ours, of making these judgments according to our own personal views of who we like and who we don't like, and taking that out upon those people. That those viewpoints change over time, and that just feels random, and it doesn't feel fair, and it doesn't earn anyone's trust, because you can't actually see what's behind it.
Do you miss the days when you would just...
I could kiss that guy, because that's reasonable. Like, I want to play that again, but just rewind and listen to that again, because that's very reasonable, and that's a guy who's trying. And you've seen that in Zuckerberg. You've seen the same thing in Zuckerberg. And so we as libertarians and conservatives and people on the right who are not big government progressives, and who are not, I mean, if you're a culturally liberal person, then maybe you feel more comfortable with these companies than maybe somebody like myself who's more culturally conservative. But I have heard the same sort of things from Zuckerberg. I trust Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey far more than I trust Nancy Pelosi and Mark Warner and any of these politicians, or Media Matters, or some of these other activist websites like the Huffington Post or Raw Story, who are trying to actively create regulations around these companies so then they can remove their competition from these companies.
Correct.
And so what I just heard is a guy who says, I value free speech, and I want to these voices change over time. So the more you engage with people, the more they change. And I'll tell you, Alex Jones, I think, I've listened, not every day, but kind of consistently over the last couple weeks. And he's actually taken stuff down, and he seems to be actively trying to play within their rules on Twitter to stay on Twitter.
Correct.
And so Jack Dorsey is correct, but you're never going to get CNN or NBC or any of these people to buy into that.
Right. Well, because the other thing is, like, he also has the ability to do the stuff he really wants to do on his own site.
Right.
He has his own site. He has his own stuff, so he can say what he wants there.
Right.
So, but since he was told his line and showed a line what he can and cannot post, he will fall inside the rules and do what he says and change. The other thing is what you're talking about is the lost the live, that the idea of you keep moving and changing the goalpost of the rules, like what's happened in YouTube, which is why a lot of different platforms and stuff like that have abandoned YouTube as a place to go. And it's why it's it's still like a viable place to go watch videos and stuff like that, but it's nowhere what it was like 2 years ago.
Well, it's why we're now on Vimeo. It's why we're now on Twitch. It's why I've applied for a Steam account to get on DTube. Not good.
Steam it.
Not good.
Steamy pile of crap. Anyways,
all right.
But that's my
opinion. I won't waste my time then.
But just do it. Just be out there. I have personally have issues with it, but if that's what you want to do, then go. Yeah, put on as many things you want. I think that's one of the philosophy we got from you is like, don't only put the paywall on some certain stuff. Other than that, let it out there. Give people content. Give people stuff out there.
If people want to share your content, you should make it as easy as possible on them, because
Correct.
people, in terms of content creation, are not going to change their behavior for you.
Right. And the idea that you can pick somebody, because like I may not like Steam It, but there could be somebody out there that likes Steam It,
right?
Gets it on it all the time and comes across a wall video.
I'm not a huge MeWe fan or WeMe, but somebody was like, you've got to have a wall group on here. So one of my goals here sooner rather than later is set up a MeWe group, and I'm not down on Gab so much, but and a Minds group.
Yeah.
Minds seems pretty cool. So let's continue on with this absolute ridiculous interview.
Just use Twitter to meet up with your friends.
Do you miss when you could just meet friends on Twitter?
To cause violence.
I think
Let's hear that question again. Listen very carefully.
And it doesn't feel fair, and it doesn't earn anyone's trust because you can't actually see what's behind it.
Do you miss the days when you would just use Twitter to meet up with your friends? Because now we're talking about how it's used to cause violence.
I think it's just so important to see the world for what it is, and I don't want to live in a world where just we only see the happy things and we only focus on like what makes us feel good, because we got a lot of stuff to figure out. So no, I don't miss them, because we're seeing a lot of important things that we need to finally discuss.
We're going to share the entire
I'm all in on that guy.
interview on our Reliable Sources podcast. But joining me now is Oliver Darcy, CNN.
Oh, Oliver Darcy. This is a media critic, a media reporter for CNN. Listen to the objective journalism about one of his competitors in the media space. Listen to how this media critic, the Oliver Darcy at CNN, has been the main person, the main cheerleader, the main hatchet man, watching Alex Jones and then sending clips. He's been the Media Matters correspondent at CNN, sending stuff to official verified Twitter and Facebook and all these companies, and writing stories, shaming these companies, saying, why are you allowing this, after taking things out of context over and over and over and over. So let's hear the objective journalism of Oliver Darcy.
And senior media reporter who's been leading the way on these questions about Alex Jones. Are Twitter's answers satisfying?
Well, one, it sounds kind of comical that he thinks that putting Alex Jones in a Twitter timeout for a week is going to really affect his behavior. But two, it sort of sounds like he's a college professor. He's dealing in hypotheticals and philosophy here. But this isn't a classroom. There are real problems that are having real impact on people's lives, and it's happening now.
I do think he's asking the right questions. But to
Sure.
your point, maybe he's short on answers.
Right. You asked for a timeline, for instance, on some of the stuff, and he doesn't have a timeline. But even the current policies that are put in place for reporting harassment, they don't seem to be working. And it's curious why, he doesn't have any answers. He doesn't have any answers for today, right now. How can Twitter better affect the discourse on politics? And it's just kind of baffling, too.
I thought Mike Allen of Axios said it really well in his news.
Oliver Darcy, by the way, is a former Blaze reporter. He worked for Glenn Beck. What caught you? What made you laugh so hard?
You sound like a professor. This is comical. I'm like, he runs a website with open source federated technology that posts memes and dick butts, and you're talking to him like he's not a professor. He's like, that should be lower than what a professor is. He's just running a site that people post things to.
Right.
He's treating him like he's literally like controlling the thought. He got culture on his thumb, and he can just do what he wants to it. This is comical. That is laughable.
Right.
Him going after that. That's so ridiculous, making Twitter to seem like, it's some sort of like congressional house. Like, I can't believe he did this on the House of the Steps. This is where Abraham Lincoln tweeted. No, it's Twitter. We're posting memes. Okay, we post memes and stupid stuff and our food. Right. I like to tweet. I've got a Twitter account, and all I do on this Twitter account, if you can find it, good freaking luck.
Hans the Spider.
How dare you? No, I don't really use that one that much anymore. But I use one, and all I do is post stupid comments about like food, health code violations of restaurants I go to.
Right.
That's all I do on this account. I go around Indy. I just post health code violations. No one cares. I don't have that many followers because no one gives a damn.
Well, the thing that's funny about that is Oliver Darcy is a former Blaze reporter, then went to the Daily Caller, then worked at Business Insider. Now he works for CNN. So here's a formerly fairly conservative-leaning guy. He's actually the person that when we did the Ron Paul interview, I tweeted at him. He put it on the Blaze website, which went to the Daily Caller, which went to the Huffington Post, which made us go viral. And our biggest downloaded episode's 114,000 downloads. Shout out Ron Paul, birthday yesterday, 83 years old, August 20th. So
would have been a great president.
It would have been the best. So I'll save my Ron Paul tribute for later. But it was so funny. I said something negative on. I've been critical of Ron Paul for various realistic reasons, and I was reading through the ratings and reviews. Please go rate and review us on iTunes or Google Podcast or Stitcher. Give us 5 stars. Otherwise, don't bother. And one of them was like, "I'm not listening to this show. They made fun of Ron Paul. They don't like Ron Paul. I'm not listening to this. They're heretics." I'm like, okay, get lost, pal. But I don't know. I just listen to this and I just go, what universe are these people living in?
I don't know. They've got their own weird ones, especially this Darcy guy. Yeah, they all have this weird box that they live in, and I don't know. It's delusional,
right?
Or just not baked or grounded in any type of reality. The idea that, sorry, I wanted to go back to this Darcy thing. I'm sorry. The idea that they want to talk Twitter this way, while Facebook has done so much garbage. And I'm not talking about that whole, like, let these Russian bots on. I'm talking about the manipulation of the algorithm to just do experiments on people.
Right.
You know, the idea that, hey, we're going to make the Facebook app crash on people through an update just to see what they'll do.
So
and that's not news. Them manipulating people.
Right.
I don't see Twitter doing that, messing with the algorithm and just mess with people.
So
it's not caught anyone.
I went to fact check myself.
Okay.
And I ended up on this website called Maranthi TV. I'm not sure what it is, but I found this quote. And so basically they're profiling. I think it's an Indian site because he's an Indian American. Let's see here. He stated in an interview that he thoroughly enjoys watching people, Oliver Darcy, enjoys watching people who abuse their power get reprimanded, especially inside classrooms. He enjoys using his presence online to promote free speech and diversity of thought, and has regularly urged people of opposing ideologies and philosophies to listen to each other and avoid limiting free speech. Screenshotting that, sending to Oliver Darcy later. So, troll him on Twitter. Yeah, like I should put this in the show notes and everybody send it to him and ask, what happened, Oliver? Let's hear Alex Jones. Let's hear what Alex Jones has to say about all this. Let's give you a chance to actually go and listen. Let's see if he rips his shirt off.
It's the truth being murdered that gets me upset. It's that I did a 20-minute live video. This was Monday night. And it had a headline about how the president's wrong to not be taking action, against internet censorship. And in it, I talk about Antifa and Rob Reiner calling for violence and civil unrest and overthrows and all the violence against conservatives. And I said we have to legislatively, judicially, criminally, through the criminal justice system, stand up against this. And this is a clear and present danger. And I said they're threatening all these Congress people and already shooting them and already attacking them and already saying and doxing their addresses and saying go to their houses and, saying harass them. And I said people need to have their battle rifle by their bed.
Alex?
Alex.
Hello? I thought he was pausing, but it's just my internet. Come on, internet. Come on. You're better than this.
Buffering real hard, bro.
It is.
Buffering hard.
Come on, Alex.
Buffering real hard.
See, now I'm gonna restart it, but we're gonna have to listen to a Super Male Vitality ad.
Yeah.
Well, he's not using Akamai anymore, so he's
freeze-dried organic whole corn, available now at shop.real.video.
It's the truth being murdered that gets me upset. It's that I did their battle rifle by their bed. If they get attacked, that's totally defensive. That's Americana.
Good God, Alex.
Okay, ahead of the midterms, they have gone to complete deception mode. And notice there's no congressional hearings having me speak. Lester Holt isn't having me on to hear what I have to say. Jack Dorsey was just on with Lester Holt.
That's a good point. Like, where's the diversity of thought? Why don't you have me on? But, of course, he shouldn't do it because they'll just edit him out of context again.
Right. It's the top of drudgereport.com. We'll put that on screen for you right now.
Good old Drudge Report.
Tech CEO Jack Dorsey on Alex Jones, election security and regrets. And then it's all about, he keeps saying nobody died at Sandy Hook. Well, I'm sad he does that. Not saying that. So it's always a way to just put me back through the ringer over and over again. Meanwhile, they've banned me, blocked me on Twitter for 7 days because the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Media Matters people put out a headline saying I said I'm going to use battle rifles on the media. It's not true. It's all a lie. But Dorsey says he hopes I quit my behavior before he bans me. So then when they ban me, it's like, well, see, we did, and then they're going to ban you too. So I love that's all big re-education camp. It's all big, giant re-education camp where they just tell me I did all the stuff I didn't do. They never show what I supposedly did. And the clip Media Matters shows, I never say what they said I did. Notice there's just quotes on single words there.
Accurate.
But all the other media that cared didn't even show the clip. You watch the clip and it's like, I didn't say that. But again, if I did, it wouldn't be an issue. It's the First Amendment. I didn't say use weapons on the media. I don't want them to have weapons used on them. That'll make them victims. I'm worried they're going to false flag and stage something on themselves. And then they're going to send Antifa out to all our houses, which they're doxing everybody saying they are. And I said defensively, be prepared to defend yourself. And they say that is inciting violence. No, it's not. Saying the Antifa can be as violent as they want, that's inciting it. We're having trouble with Tosh Plumlee's phone. It was working great earlier. He's had folks breaking in on it, blocking it, threatening him. They're scared of what he's about to talk about. It's not any classified stuff. It's about the threats. Famous CIA whistleblower. That's why they don't want us on air, because big stuff's coming. But here it is, top story on Drudge. It's also on Infowars.com. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey on Alex Jones, election security and regrets. Here it is.
All right. So that is your Alex Jones recap. Thought he made a couple good points. Facebook has actually apologized. Moving on a little bit, Facebook has actually apologized for removing content from Prager University's Facebook page after the organization claimed they're being heavily censored. This is on Mediaite. We mistakenly removed these videos and have restored them because they don't break our standards, Facebook wrote on Twitter on Friday. Facebook added they will reverse any reduction in content distribution you've experienced. We're very sorry and are continuing to look into what happened with your page. So just like Jack Dorsey said, you've got a problem with people not believing that these companies are open platforms, and that's a huge part of their business model. That's a huge part of their attraction. They don't want 50% of the United States of America to just walk away and say, no, thanks, I'm good. So, so how many of you are listening on Overcast? What podcast app do you listen on, Harry?
I use Google Play Music.
Okay, I use Downcast. That is Bay. I've tried out pretty much all the major podcast apps, but Downcast is by far my favorite, especially I have like 1,200 subscriptions, so I have a ton. Most of you, 70% of you, on any podcast are listening on the Apple Podcast app, the native app, but Overcast has a fair amount of people, and so Marco Arment, the guy, I think he founded Instapaper, which I use and love. He no longer is involved in it. He went on to run something called Magazine, which was like a magazine on iOS. And now he runs Overcast, which I'm considering doing Overcast ads. On the Overcast app, you can do advertisements within the app, which seems like a really great way to get new listeners, but I'm not going to give them any of my money after what he announced this week. So let me play part of his podcast, because I think if you are listening to us on Overcast, and a fair amount of you are, according to our statistics, I think you need to hear what your podcast app is up to. So let's go to his podcast. 286, I respect a good crust. About 49 minutes in.
Where this gets complicated and where the news this week comes in is...
So essentially he's saying, hey, we use... Basically what these apps do is they import the iTunes directory because they have good standards. They have the biggest, everybody's in iTunes directory because they're OG. And so what a lot of these little apps do is they import the actual directories.
Is the user experience of a podcast app is usually not people entering URLs of all the feeds they want. You can do that. You can go to the website of the podcast you want to listen to. You can find somewhere there's going to be a link to their RSS feed, and you can copy that link, and you can paste that URL into the add URL box in almost any podcast app, and you can listen that way. That's fine. But the way most people do it is they just use some built-in search function of the podcast, and they search a directory of podcasts. By far, the biggest directory out there is Apple's podcast directory. The way you get into Apple's podcast directory is you go to Apple and you submit your feed for consideration, and they make sure that it doesn't break any obvious, rules, like that it's not illegal or that it's not, obscene or spam, or I believe they don't allow porn or other adult content. Apple has people review those, and then they say, okay, this is okay to be in our directory, and they add it to the directory. They're still not actually hosting the file, but they're maintaining a search index. Mm-hmm. So that way when people go to their app, they don't have to enter the URL of every RSS feed. They can just type in, This American Life, and Apple, uses their search engine and say, okay, here, this is the URL for the show you just asked for. Here it is. And you never have to see it as the user. It just gets added to your podcast app. And so it seems kind of like you're using something that Apple's in full control over. It seems like you're searching Apple Podcasts for podcasts that are in Apple Podcasts and playing them, and Apple Podcasts is therefore, responsible for everything in it. In reality, though, the technical details of that are closer to a web browser with a search engine, in the sense that, a web browser can navigate to any URL, just like a podcast app could play any URL's podcast. You need to understand other languages to know, eventually. And so I don't want anything to do with that. So I don't have any text input, direct. iTunes ID or not, I will not show a podcast that has the iTunes block attribute set, which is a custom that's illegal. And you can play it in my app. Legally, I'm probably not at fault there. It also, the Apple deals with copyright issues. Like, somebody can't just for what they allow in their podcast directory, and are in many jurisdictions are actually illegal. And so a listener emailed me saying, "Hey, I'm leaving your app because you host this content, and it's horrible." I looked and I'm like, this should not be allowed. Like, this is clearly in violation.
Meaning Alex Jones existed, and he didn't know this. He probably was sent Media Matters content from this person,
right?
And saying Alex Jones is in your directory. Now, I'm not just playing this over Alex Jones, because I think if you're an NRA fan, you need to hear this.
Of Apple's own content guidelines. And they were already, at that point, they were already having problems with Facebook and YouTube because they were violating their guidelines too. And so I do have a mechanism in Overcast that I can override a feed that would otherwise show up, and I can say this feed should not show up. I haven't used this mechanism very often. I used it once before for NRATV for similar reasons, that I believe that it was violating Apple's own guidelines. And I used it, I think, 2 or 3 times, something like that. Occasionally, a random podcaster will find Overcast, will say, "Hey, my podcast is showing up in your app. That's copyright infringement. I demand you take it down." And you know what? When people say that, I say, "Okay." And I set this flag. And it's gone from Overcast. Anyway.
So, long story short, Marco Arment at Overcast does not share your values and is blocking NRA podcasts and is blocking Alex Jones. And I guess the other few times that he probably used that were not, the Pod Save America guys.
Right.
And those are his values, and it is his app, and it is his property, and it is for him to do what he'd like. And we fully support him to do, and I was going to financially support him. I'm not going to now. I'm not going to take the $200, $400, $500 I was going to spend to get new listeners in Overcast advertising. I'm just not going to do it now, because he and I don't have the same values when it comes to free speech. It's not a matter of him being a liberal. It's a matter of him thinking that he should be the one who is in charge of what other adults should hear or think. And I think you have to kind of step out from all of this and step back and get out of the Facebook argument and really think about this and go, wait a minute. Other grown adults think that they are smart enough or right enough to tell other adults what they can or can't engage with. Like, to me, that's just the crazy. It's like, to me, it's as foreign of a thinking pattern as, like, not liking Harry because he has more melanin than me. Like, there's nothing biologically different between Harry and I. And so, like, racism to me is like the dumbest concept ever. And in the same way, like, thinking that you're so smart and so important that you are in charge of what others should think is so insane to me. So I think, if you run a podcast app, you should be a neutral platform. And obviously, as he said early on, if you subscribe to Alex Jones in the app, he can't remove that. He's not going to remove that. He just doesn't want to host it in his directory. And fair enough. But I think if you agree with that, then you continue to use Overcast. If not, then I suggest Downcast. I tried out Pocket Cast. I like that. It's fairly similar. Castro, although I don't know that Castro is going to be around a while. But Pocket Cast is owned by NPR, so it's not like it's getting better over there. But it's just an ever shrinking amount of access to the marketplace of ideas, and the scope of what is acceptable for people like listeners of this program is shrinking. And so it's scary. And another one of our vendors, Patreon, was in the news this week.
Yes.
For something that is not even under their control, really, at the end of the day. So there's a guy named Robert Spencer, not to be confused with Richard Spencer. Robert Spencer is a person who runs a site called jihadwatch.org, and basically he watches jihad, and he keeps track of Islamic terrorism, and he, is labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so if you get on the bad side of the Anti-Defamation League, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Media Matters, you're pretty much hosed.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what you think or do or say, as long as they lie about you and they assassinate your character, then you're gone. It doesn't matter what happens. And so Robert, again, not to be confused with Richard, put out a post on a few days ago that he was, I'll just read this to you from his page. A few weeks ago, the great David Wood swung by my office and helped me set up a Patreon account. We made a video in which I explained that I had come into possession of what once had been a working TV studio, and that I hope to make it into a working studio again for regular Jihad Watch videos. Man, if there's anybody in the Indianapolis area with a TV studio that would like to help us out. The whole endeavor...
clean.
Yeah, exactly. I've never said anything bad on this podcast. The whole endeavor had barely gotten off the ground, however, when I received this email yesterday afternoon. This is April 14th when the email was sent. Hi, Robert. My name is April, and I'm on the Trust and Safety team here at Patreon. I've been notified by MasterCard that we must remove your account from Patreon effective immediately. MasterCard has a stricter set of rules and regulations than Patreon, and they reserve the right to not offer their services to accounts of their choosing. This is in line with their terms of service, which means it's something that we have to comply by. I have paid out your remaining creator balance of $475 to you via direct deposit. I'm sorry for the inconvenience and frustration this might cause. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'm here to help. I'd been given no warning before this. Anything amiss with my account, which at the time consisted of that single video announcing the initiative, along with a note announcing that I would be starting a live stream. That was it. So what violated their rules? They hadn't explained, but when I went to my Patreon account, I got this, and he was disabled. So I wrote back to April. My account was disabled. Explanation, please. No answer. Later on Twitter, however, when I announced this, I got a reply. Hi, Robert. We emailed you earlier today, which explained that, unfortunately, MasterCard required us to remove your account. You replied to us, but if you have further questions, we're happy to keep emailing. He writes, this was plainly disingenuous. They had not been emailing with me, then never explained why MasterCard objected to my account or why they had to comply with MasterCard's wishes, and didn't answer my request for an explanation. I don't have a MasterCard and didn't have one attached to my Patreon account. So MasterCard wasn't really involved unless it owns Patreon, which is apparently the case. No, Boomer. It's not how this works.
Yeah. So the whole article is all Boomer.
Yeah. He's a boomer. He's an older guy. Of course, what is almost certainly going on here is that MasterCard and Patreon is deleting accounts that have been smeared by the hard-left propaganda hate group, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, despite the fact that the SPLC has been resoundingly discredited, and the SPLC defames me as a hate group leader and an anti-Muslim extremist. Here, for the record, is my response to their charges, which you can go read at this particular post, which will be in the show notes. So there was an update. Breitbart actually sent them an email, and this is what they replied back. A MasterCard spokesman responded to a Breitbart news request for comment with the following statement. As part of our normal process, we share information about websites that may have illegal content with the acquirer. or merchant's bank that connects them to our network to accept card payments. The acquirer would then review the site for compliance with legal requirements and our standards. They would then determine what action to take. In this case, the acquirer advised us that they had decided to terminate the acceptance. I would love to know what is illegal on this guy's site, because it didn't look like anything wild. I mean, it looked like, typical boomer Republican stuff.
Right, yeah.
And as far as I know, he's not Richard Spencer. He's not a nut job. He's just not mainstream, and he's not even Pamela Geller of, what's the Pamela Geller site, the Gateway Pundit. He's in that crowd, certainly, Front Mag and David Horowitz and all that, the Newsmax crowd, but he's not, he's not Richard Spencer.
Right, which I'm thinking, like, reading the article and going through all this, I keep wondering, like, is this just mistaken identity that somebody messaged to MasterCard, like, hey, did you know you have our because
right.
And unless they're into it, like, that's that Nazi guy. If you can't have this Nazi guy on you, we're walking away. We told you about this once, and I'm sure someone in Patreon is like, no, this is someone different. Nope, I'm sorry. I've already came to the heads. They said that, either you do this or this. Nope, not budging.
I now see the importance of crypto. This article single-handedly made me go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I get why so many libertarians who are a little more underground than I am have been advocating this for a decade. Because when you start getting one of the two big credit card processors start getting into violating free speech, not violating free speech, but making decisions, swinging their weight around to try and influence public discourse. And you don't see conservatives doing this. You don't see libertarians doing this. You don't see independents or centrists doing this. You don't even see mainstream Democrats doing this. You see a very motivated group of people who are making trouble for most of the country, and it's really disheartening.
Yep. Can you imagine? Because they've done this to gun sellers, they've done this to sex workers. Okay, see what they can get away with. Very small things, small businesses, all these small businesses, right?
Right.
And they've also done it, and conservatives cheered on to weed shops in Colorado, make them do, doing cash sales.
Right.
So what would happen if every gun store couldn't take credit card transactions?
Right.
Boom. I was like, how are you going to say, well, people can bring cash. Man, I could eat. I don't feel comfortable walking around $100 in cash, even though I'm going to go buy a gun with it.
Right.
And then, now you have all this money, and you have guns. This is about... Even though you have guns, this is awful. Does not look good.
Yeah.
And then if they won't let you deposit it into the bank, then how you gonna do payroll? How you gonna buy guns? How you gonna get guns from your shipper? Who you gonna get them from? Even though you have these FFL and all these different licenses to get to them, but if you can't use credit card transactions, how you gonna do it?
Right.
Crypto. And that's the main thing with crypto. Is like, hey, that's all I wanted to do. I want to be able to send money and have someone accept money that's far away. And I want to do it cheaply. I want to do it effectively. And that's what I want to do. And if it can be anonymous, awesome. I don't want pseudo-crappy anonymous. I want pseudo-anonymous. I don't want pseudo-anonymous. I want DK Snarks anonymous. I want anonymous. I want an anonymous ledger, okay? I want it to be easy. I don't want it can be hard. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy like cash, but I want it anonymous like cash, and the simple fact that I can just give out with a low transaction fee. Yes, I understand transaction fees has to be something for the network, but the fact when it balloons up to a point where I can't get a piece of gum, no, it's too much. Sorry.
Okay, you're shouting now.
Sorry.
All right, calm down. You're really screeching hard, okay?
But that's the beauty of the cryptocurrency, and not this other bull crap everyone keeps flowing into this thing.
Right.
And everyone's like, well, I'm going to hoard in and do this. It's going to be this. It's going to be cool, and it's going to do all this other stuff. It's like, no, at its time, when it was built, this is what we really wanted, because it's not like they were going after all these people. They also were going after people who were donating to antiwar.com.
Right.
When PayPal blocked them off so they couldn't accept currency, so they couldn't do their thing, they were also going after people who donated cash. Like, hey, did you know you donate?
Antiwar.com got banned from PayPal.
Mm-hmm. For a short bit of time.
Antiwar.com.
Yep.
There's nothing even remotely offensive about antiwar.com.
You piss off someone on the right thing, and then get a nice mob going, you can get banned from anything. Yeah. At one point, for a short bit of time till you get back in. But can you survive the 3 months that you can't take it in funds?
Right.
You know, could you imagine if you were like living off the Patreon feed money and they kicked you off for 2 months?
Even now, if we got kicked off of Patreon for 2 months, we'd be done. I mean, we wouldn't be done, but we would be.
It'd hurt. We'd
be
really
bare
hurt.
bones. Yeah.
We'd really hurt. It'd be hurting. Yeah, it'd be hurting. It's like, hey, we can only offer the 20 episodes and.
Yeah.
You know.
No,
and,
that's for sure.
Yeah, and Harry created 15 bot accounts for bandwidth wise.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're with a great host who I love a lot, but they're in Austin, and they're probably a little more liberal, and they're into the tech community, and it's like, I don't know if you know the 5x5 network, but we host with Fireside.fm, and I love the service. It's cheap, it's super reliable, it's been great for us. It was a great step up for us, but yeah, like one phone call. Yeah. And it's diaspora. We can't go back to Bluehost. The way that we used to do it is I hosted it on our shared server. Can you imagine? Oh, we crashed the heck out of our website when that Ron Paul thing came out. So then all right, so Libsyn, nah. You Blueberry, nah. Yeah. It's a small community. Like, the reality is, yes, there are alternatives, but if you get collusion going and you get the 5 major podcast hosts at Podcast Movement comparing notes about you, you're hosed.
Right.
You're on some unreliable, expensive ass service, or you're trying to make it work with something dumb like Dropbox or Amazon Web Services. Like, there aren't a ton of think about credit card processors. Like, if MasterCard, Visa won't take you, and then all you're left with is American and Discover. Like, Discover is super expensive to operate. Like, if you want to take Discover cards, it's expensive. So
yep, you eat that up on transaction fees,
right?
And then but they're gonna go too. They're like, no. In American Express, it was like, oh no, you look shady. We're done.
Right. So exactly right. And so you have all these crony capitalistic companies, especially Visa and MasterCard, when they start throwing their weight around, that's really concerning. Yep. And I think as consumers, we have to, and I will repeat it again, we have to stand up to these companies and say this is unacceptable behavior. And we have to say to the companies like Twitter, thank you. Yep. Because I guarantee you, I'm the first person to say thank you to Twitter for not banning Alex Jones. Out of the millions that are hitting them.
Correct. Yeah. So. But yeah, and that's just something like the like I said, that's why like Operation Choke Point, they were doing that. That's how they were going after different people, and exactly the same thing for presidential campaigns. Can you imagine that if they just said like, we're not gonna let the LP take Visa transactions for donations?
All right.
Not saying they would.
Listen, we're not mad at Patreon. Because I feel Patreon was probably over a barrel when MasterCard. Then I mean, I'm not mad at them at all. So we're sticking with Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, Harry,
what?
Never mind.
Did I miss that cue?
No, you didn't miss a cue.
Did I miss a cue?
Listen, I'm not good with all the radio stuff yet. I never was good at it actually. But
line.
So speaking of Patreon, Harry, there we go. Long ago, opinion journalism only existed in newspapers and magazines, but the internet has given rise to new voices like We Are Libertarians. Few people are doing what we do, giving a libertarian opinion on modern life and politics in a fun and entertaining way. We are building something special here, but we cannot do it without your help. We're hiring freelancers, building up our website, planning to grow into the largest libertarian voice in America by 2020. So help us convert more people to the movement that is changing the world by giving us the tools to do it by contributing to our Patreon. Become a citizen, $5 a month, and get our bonus content, CD quality shows, and commercial free before anyone else. At $10, Nobility get access to an exclusive Facebook group and a notification to join the live stream and chat with us during the show. Members of the Royal Court get $25 at $25 a month, get a poster and free shipping in the new We Are Libertarian store. You can also join the Emperor's Circle at $100 a month, and you get to sit in on our co-host strategy calls that are forthcoming, private access to Dear Leader in Dear Leader's chambers, and a guest spot on the show. Like we said, Craig DaCosta will be on next week. So this is the number one way to help the show. So if you want to help us grow, this is the way to do it. Special thanks to Craig DaCosta, Brandon Luke, Jason Doolittle, Christy Avery, Paul Jonathan Eads Jr., and now the Liberty Coalition for being members of the $100 a month Emperor Circle. And a special thank you to Jason Doolittle. While we were on the show here, he upped his Patreon to $125 a month.
Woo!
So he's doing both the nobility and the Emperor's Circle level. And so we want to thank Jason so much for his effort. He said that donation is for the Chris Spangle Show. So thank you, Jason. Welcome back to We Are Libertarians, episode number 308. I'm Chris Spangle, and here with me is Harry Price. Harry, how are you?
I'm going good. A little cold, but I'm still going.
Yeah, it's 65 in here. It's a little chilly. If you're not subscribed to the show, please do so now in your favorite podcast app. Please be sure to leave a review and rating while you're there. And this segment is brought to you by our Patreon.